part of the digestion, the mechanical part of it, starts with chewing, starts in our mouth. Our stomach can't really handle breaking down. Like, you don't want to give it so much work to do.
I work for a supplement company. I eat, breathe, sleep supplements.
Yeah.
But if you are not doing these foundational things, and our world is just getting busier, our lives are just getting more packed, and we're having more and more problems.
Being efficient is great, but that doesn't mean that I've freed up space to put more on my plate. If I'm going to become efficient, my goal needs to be to free up space to really just be present and enjoy my life and do these things that are actually going to be much more healing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wellness for Life. I'm your host, Niki Wolf, and today's conversation is surprising in a way. It was going to take a completely different direction, but I am so fascinated and excited to explore this conversation with you. We have an incredible guest, Dr. Anjali Kasunich, naturopathic doctor and consultant, really dedicated her time, her efforts into talking about balancing hormone health, gut health, balancing and regulating the nervous system. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So just to kind of give general context for the listener, we were going to explore the ins, outs, who, what, where, when of SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And it is such an important conversation and something that a lot of individuals face. But the more we started talking about it, the more we kind of came back to the basics. Because most of our listeners, and, you know, Dr. Anjali, I'll have you kind of explore how you got to where you are and your background a little bit. But we both had some experience working at a major health food store in Los Angeles called Erewhon. And some of the most intelligent customers shop here. They have done their research. They will spend a very good amount of money to get the best of the best. Yeah. But no matter the amount of supplements you take, protocols you do, so many people are still struggling. And this comes back to the importance of the basics, of the foundational tools to get our gut aligned. And so that's what we're going to explore today. But before we dive in, do you mind kind of setting the stage for our listeners of how you got to where you are now, what got you so passionate about health and the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my journey started with my own health concerns. So I struggled with really, really bad anxiety and panic attacks since I was really young. Like, I think I had my first panic attack when I was like 8 or 10. And that led to a series of various different doctors trying to rule out a bunch of different things. And ultimately they came to the conclusion that I have anxiety, really bad anxiety. And thankfully, I have a, wonderful mom who, she took me to therapy and just all these things that were certainly very helpful, but also just the sort of protocol for it was a bunch of meds. And I remember thinking at the time, and, this was years and years of sort of going through the rigmarole of the system and trying different meds and on and off and all of that. And I just remember thinking, like, is this the only way? Is this the only way to deal with this? Because it's not really working for me. And as I got older, I became more and more passionate about at least just being the kind of doctor who, first of all, just really listens well to their patients, because after seeing so many doctors, I came to appreciate really the doctors who listened to me, like let me tell my story, who looked me in the eye, who asked me if I had anything else to say and didn't cut me off. And that was really meaningful to me. And then doctors, I was like, I want to be a doctor that gives a patient some options, because I never really felt like there were options given to me. It was like, this is what you do. And that's it. And again, there's certainly a time and a place for all of these things. Our system certainly does very well in certain ways, but I think in other ways it maybe falls a bit short. And at least for me, in the treatment of anxiety, it felt a bit short. And with anxiety came a lot of gut issues and came a lot of, irregularities in my period. So there are some more meds. And I decided, I was like, I'm going to start to go down the path of becoming a doctor. And I'm going to try to figure this out because I'm sure that there are other options available that I'm just not seeing yet. And I eventually decided before starting med school to work for a holistic doctor. And I was like, well, this is perfect. This would be great. And it was a wonderful experience because it was this doctor who was providing other options. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're talking about diet. You're talking about meditation. You're talking about if a patient is like, I really don't want to do the meds right now. Can we do something else? He was like, yeah, let's try this. And if this doesn't work, we have the meds as an option. And that blew my mind. And I actually did end up starting at a conventional medical school to become an MD. And I was so excited, and I started like the holistic medicine club there. But I remember feeling like I was the only one who was interested in this. And I felt it was very difficult. The med school is difficult. It's just difficult in and of itself. It's much more difficult when you don't feel like you have a support system. And I didn't feel like I had that in this passion that I had, because I was very passionate about, like, this stuff works. I've seen it work. Can we talk about this? And I would always get shut down. Like, diet doesn't matter. You're not going to have time to talk to your patients about diet. So it's a waste of time. And so I took a leave of absence because it really just kind of crushed my soul. And I went back to the holistic doctor that I was working for out here in LA, where I'm located. And he sat me down and he had this really nice heart to heart. And he said, he said, Anjali, the same thing happened to me when I went to med school. He said, the only difference is I wish I knew about naturopathic doctors when I went to med school, because if I did, I would have become a naturopathic doctor. And I didn't know what this was at that point. This was a whole new thing for me. So I decided, well, before I just give up the idea entirely of becoming a doctor, let me talk to some of these doctors. And it was like a light turned on or something. I'll never forget the first ND that I met. I felt like I met my people. It was everything I wanted. I just didn't know what it was called. And so right away I transferred and I went to Bastyr University, and it felt like it all kind of came together perfectly, because Bastyr happened to open up their California campus right as I was applying. So I didn't even have to leave the state. And it was so incredible. And I had such a wonderful cohort of classmates, such an incredible group of professors, and we were just such a scrappy bunch. So I feel like all of the people from my class, at least, we've gotten very good at figuring things out and making do with maybe a little bit, but making it work really well for us. And in my journey as in naturopathic school, I of course worked with a lot of naturopathic doctors in my own health. And what I was able to, which for me, I was very proud of because this was very much a goal of mine, I was able to come off of all of my medications. And for me, that was right for me because I was having a lot of side effects and it wasn't really even helping with my anxiety. So I'm like, why am I on this? But all my other doctors were like, well, don't go off of it because then your anxiety will get way worse. So I was like, well, I guess I don't want that. But I was so proud that we were able to dig deeper and find some underlying things. And I tell people it's always a journey. I'm still always finding out new things about myself. I'm like, oh yeah, this could also be one of my triggers. So let me maybe tend to this a little bit more. But it was such an eye-opening experience. And so it was nice that even in the process of being in school, I was becoming more passionate about becoming the type of doctor that I was becoming. And now as a practicing doctor, I'm still more and more passionate because I still have to go see the doctor on my own sometimes. And I'll get a doctor who I feel listens really well, and that feels great. And I get a doctor who maybe I don't feel like listens so well to me. And so that can be a bummer, but it ignites me even more to be like, this is why I'm this way. This is why I make sure to listen to my patients and I give them these options. This is why I became this kind of doctor. So it continually lights that fire for me.
Absolutely. I love the story and the transition and just your persistence of pursuing your degree, even in the midst of, okay, this doesn't feel right, but I know that there's something that's still connected. And I'm with you. I mean, I don't have a degree. I wish if I could go back, I mean, I have a bachelor's in public health and I'm a certified functional health coach. If I could go back, I would absolutely have gone to become a naturopathic doctor. And I know I still can if I wanted to. I mean, it just takes time and I'm not too far from Basir. But the avenues now that there are that you can learn to heal your body in a natural way. And to your point, there is a time and a place for Western medicine, but I think usually that's under certain circumstances, or that's the last option. At least for me, in my personal experience, I've been in the hospital since I was 3 for a variety of reasons. And it wasn't until I utilized naturopathic, Eastern approaches, integrative approaches, where I really found vibrancy and healing, and kind of thriving beyond just that mere survival through all these different things. But I appreciate you laying out this story. And I know that there's a heart for helping individuals with anxiety, with their gut health issues because of your personal experiences. And one thing that we were talking about before of coming back to the basics. And I kind of want to explore that a little bit because, and I know I talked about Erewhon briefly, and it's EREWHON. If you follow on social media or like certain celebrities, you probably are familiar with this story, and it's incredible. It's like a health museum of, it's just crazy. You have to experience it.
Yeah.
But most individuals that shop there are very conscious consumers. They're extremely educated. They're following all these protocols, yet they still struggle. And that's not to say, I mean, even you and I, whatever experts, it doesn't mean we don't struggle with other things. But
Absolutely.
There's a lot of times some foundational things that we are missing. And I want to pull this back to the conversation of gut health, because we could be taking this supplement, following this protocol, doing low FODMAP and, fine tuning everything, but we're missing the basics.
Yeah.
And I'd love to kind of pull apart that situation, what those basics are, and I guess what the majority of those individuals kind of look like. I know that's generalizing, but I think especially like we live in Southern California, it's a very specific type of individual that tends to struggle with some of this stuff. So I'd love to kind of lay that out for the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So and you please feel free to add to this, but I know a lot of the people that I would meet, and I can certainly relate because I've been in this place too. So, I could see a lot of myself in these people at one time, but they're like that very type A kind of person. They're working very hard. They are probably managing several companies and have at least one startup on the side, and they are traveling constantly. They're working every day. It's almost like they're never not working. And it's like they're constantly finding ways to hack their health, just optimize, make everything better so that they can be able to perform to the level that they need to for everything that's on their plate. Is, again, it's like multiple companies that they're dealing with, hundreds, if not thousands of employees that they're managing. And a lot of times when I would talk to them, it was almost like we couldn't have a full conversation without them having to check their phone and constantly getting something that needed their attention every minute. Well, that was kind of the picture that I would see.
And I can speak to my own accord, and it's just go, 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 busy, filling every moment with productivity.
Yes.
Whether you're managing multiple jobs or even you're filling those blank moments. If you can't go to the restroom without taking your phone, and I raise my hand to all this stuff, and it's like we live in this society where it's go, go, go. You fill all these moments. And we have, I think something that's surfacing is like this homesteading, very calm on the farm life, but we're scrolling and trying to live through that scrolling. We're not actually becoming that. And I can't say that for everybody. I know that I have friends who are actually living that. And I'm like, I'd love to.
Yeah.
we tend to be that orthorexic type where it's like, let's narrow down and remove as many things as possible and eat as healthy. And you use the right word, optimize. Like, let's optimize everything. Yet we have all these other issues. Stuff is starting to fall apart and kind of unravel at the seams, whether that's our gut health, whether that's our nervous system, which, I mean, the two of those are absolute correlation. We're fast eaters. Yeah. We eat on the go because we have to. We don't have time. So you got to shovel this. Maybe you have kids, and I know I'm in a season where I'm eating while she's eating. I'm standing and doing all this stuff, but we're starting to neglect some of the foundational things, and we're noticing it in our nervous system, in our gut, and that's going to impact the rest of our job. So whether we are managing multiple companies, whether we are a parent and we need to kind of nourish and love on these kids, we think, well, we don't have time to do this simple stuff or to slow down. What are some of these common things that we're doing? And what are some practical ways that we can, and I don't even want to use the word optimize in this point. Yeah. Maybe even just like, let's balance that nervous system and I'm speaking specifically to these type A individuals. They've got a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
How do we support them?
Well, one thing I always like to, it's a bit of a balancing act, right? Where I never want to have them feel like I'm judging them for being so busy. Like, oh my gosh, look at you. You're busy and it's not great for you. But I also like to emphasize, like, where are places in your life that you can take a moment at least. And then eventually, I think once we start to realize, oh, that felt really nice. I don't talk about this enough, and this is actually inspiring me to talk more about this, but I find, and I'll speak for myself here, it can be very easy when I'm busy to find ways to get better at being busy. I get more efficient, which just then means that I can take on more onto my plate. But really, I've had to start shifting the perspective of like, no, being efficient is great, but that doesn't mean that I've freed up space to put more on my plate. If I'm going to become efficient, my goal needs to be to free up space to really just be present and enjoy my life and do these things that are actually going to be much more healing, which means going for a walk in nature, sitting in a garden, and not feeling like it has to be productive time in any sort of way. And so I sometimes like to give that little seed to patients or any clients of like, just as you're trying to optimize or improve efficiency, just kind of remember why you're doing that and not just add more so that you get better at being busier. But all that is to say, I always like to meet people where they're at. And so it might look different for each person. So for some people, I might say, well, okay, if you're eating on the go all the time, is there a way that before you take a bite, take 5 breaths? I really hope that you have time to take 5 breaths before you have a meal. And even better, if you're able to, I think there was one patient who, he would have to eat on the go because he'd be traveling a lot. He said if there's 1 meal a day or 3 meals a week that you can just pull over and sit somewhere and just eat your food, not in your car, but in some actual place, that can make a really big difference. And so finding ways for that to just make more space in those moments is what I like to encourage.
You know what's crazy is how difficult that can be.
Yes.
To eat, to monotask, to eat with no distraction. Like, I can't remember, how often I eat a meal because I work from home. And so my daughter's out of the house, my husband's out of the house, and I'm when was the last time I ate a meal where I'm not playing a YouTube video?
Yeah.
Where I'm not filling my brain. And I feel like I've done a good job that I've recalibrated. Okay, can I go on a walk without pulling in more information, without listening to an audiobook or a podcast? Can I drive without doing that? And I feel like I've gotten that down. I feel good with that. And maybe that's your step. Let's say you have an hour commute. Can you do 10 minutes in silence and sit in that and get a little uncomfortable in that? Can you go to the restroom? Because that used to be a built-in time where we had those breaks in the day where we weren't pulling our phones in. Whether you're going 1 or 2, it doesn't matter. We're constantly pulling our phones in because it's just an opportunity to consume, whether you're doing it for the purpose of entertainment or distraction or to learn. And I think a lot of our listeners that we're talking about specifically here are these learners, optimizers, growers. How do we be better? How do we, improve on things? And I found that I like what you were talking about of, sometimes we're trying to do things to be more efficient so that we can take on more. And to your point of, no, let's be more efficient so that we have more time to actually recharge. And that recharging might have to look a little bit different in the beginning. So for instance, if I have, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever to recharge, I know right now in the beginning of this season for me of struggling with this, being inside the house isn't ideal for me because I might do laundry and pull a YouTube video up. I might cook or meal prep, pull a YouTube video or podcast up. So it's still keeping me connected. My thing that's been really helpful is gardening, because not only am I getting in nature, I'm actually like in the dirt, in the soil. My hands are in it. I'm getting dirty. I'm in the sunshine. And so maybe that might look different for individuals of what is going to be that hobby or that application that can truly disconnect you. And that might be a class, like a workout class, whether that's yoga or cycling or whatever that can actually break that separation. And I say from the phone or from whatever that is. Do you have any other kind of ideas that might really create that separation?
Well, yeah, I sometimes, and I all your ideas, I 100% echo. They're amazing. And depending on each person, so sometimes sitting in the silence is not where they're ready to be yet, and that's fine. And so if someone is very much like, but I need to have a scheduled thing, and that's how I function, then fine. So then taking a class, or I often love to encourage people to have, if there's an accountability buddy that they could have. So for a while, and this is always such a good reminder because I fell out of this routine for a bit, but for a while, one of my really good friends, she and I tend to be very busy all the time, but we both were really making it a priority where we're like, once a month, we take the afternoon off and we meet up. Have you ever been to the Huntington Gardens in Pasadena and Los Angeles?
I don't think I have.
If you're in that area, it is beautiful. It is just such a lovely, it's such a vast place. And you can just sort of sit and be, and it's so calming. It's kind of one of my Zen spots. I love going there whenever I can. And it's the same with her. And so we would once a month have this sort of standing date of going and spending this time. And we would put our feet in the grass. We would just sit and look in the flowers and talk about life. And it was just so nourishing for both of our souls. And it was something that if we had it on the calendar, neither one of us wanted to cancel because we didn't want to let the other person down. And so it was this sort of accountability thing of like, no, we're doing this because we need to, at the very least, look out for each other. And by the end of it, both of us were like, oh gosh, I feel so good. Like I feel so replenished in a way that no supplement ever could do for me. And I found when I start to feel that, it reminds me, I need to do this more often than just once a month. I need to really have this time, which is really just for me, sitting in nature and talking with somebody that I care about. That is very meaningful to me. So I tell people, if there's a person in your life that you care about and want to spend more time with, maybe they could be your self-care buddy, and you either go somewhere that you like and get tea together, or you go to a class together. And now not only are you doing this fun thing, but you're doing it with somebody, which is also so nourishing for ourselves.
Well, and you made a good point, especially to these, again, we're speaking to these to everybody, but I think a lot of type A people, where if you do struggle fitting it in and you're a scheduler, schedule it in, whether that is a once a month event or whether that's a daily, here's my 20-minute break where I am detached. Put that in your calendar. And something that I do, not that I'm like a fan of having an Alexa or Google Home, and I do have it, but like if I'm going out in the garden, something naturally we might think of like, okay, well, what if I end up getting pulled out too long and I miss a meeting? Have your alarm go off that you can be completely distracted. Utilize these advances that we have and say, set an alarm, scream at me when it's time for me to come in, and utilize these scheduling, these things. And, this reminds me of a conversation my husband and I had the other day at church. It was Sunday, and we were talking about, fitting certain things in. And at the end of the day, we will always have things to do. Errands to do, things to catch up on, especially when you have a family. There's always going to be stuff to do. You have to fit in the fun, the play, the slow down, the rest. You have to, because if you don't fit it in, and whether that fit it in means like organically, like, oh, let's just do this, or it means schedule it in, it's not going to happen. And it's so important for our soul, for our nervous system. I mean, we talk about, I think the common thread with every single conversation I've had with all different experts on gut health is nervous system.
Yeah.
You got to balance your nervous system. You got to regulate your nervous system. Almost every single episode we have discussed that. And again, I work for a supplement company. I eat, breathe, sleep supplements.
Yeah.
But if you are not doing these foundational things, and our world is just getting busier, our lives are just getting more packed, and we're having more and more problems.
Yeah.
And so coming back to these basics, getting out in nature, getting in the sun. I know we talked about eating on the go, but what about even the speed in which we eat? I'm just going to say this. I don't know. I feel like I have no shame. Like, I'm an open book. There's not even a cover on me. I was on a call the other day with a colleague talking about some of my gut health issues. And she goes, Niki, you eat really fast. And I was like, were you saying that? Or like, did you see it? And she goes, oh no, I saw it. Like, I eat like I just shovel food in. I've always been a really fast eater. And I'm like, I kind of more views it as like, yeah, I got a 1-year-old, we don't got time. No, I've been doing this well before my child came into the picture. What is eating fast? How is that affecting our digestion?
It's a great question. And a quick little funny segue that my husband had pointed this out, because I tend to be a very slow eater, and I've just been like that since I was a child. I was always almost sort of criticized for it, because I would be the last person finishing up food, and everyone's like, oh gosh, all right, well, you have to wait for Anjali to finish her food. It's going to take a while. And so for a long time in college, I was like, oh gosh, I got to try to eat faster. And then it wasn't until I went to naturopathic medical school where they're like, no. What you're doing is right. Please don't try to change that. My husband tends to eat really quickly, and he told me that I guess there's a social media trend going on, which I haven't seen yet. I don't know if you've seen this on your social media, but it's like spouses or friends who they try to eat at the pace of the other person. And so for some people, it's miserable because they're trying to like shovel food in. They're like, I'm going to choke. And for the other person, it might be incredibly boring because they're like, I feel like I have been chewing on the same thing for an hour. So I just thought that was such a funny trend that's going around.
But that would be, I feel like I eat faster than my husband, but he's not, I wouldn't say he's a slow eater. I would say like in the spectrum, he might be even closer to the fast one. But I mean, I could imagine there's some major health benefits to slowing down. And I've been around a few individuals where they are slow eaters, and I'm like, it just blows your mind because you don't see it anymore. Like, I mean, you don't not see it anymore, but I don't know, maybe everybody in my life is a fast eater, and that's just kind of like what I've been accustomed to. I mean, are your parents, like the individuals you were around growing up, were they fast or slow eaters?
So here's my theory, because my my mom is a faster eater. My dad is too, but I'm an only child. And I remember my mom telling me that the reason she would eat really quickly was because if she didn't eat quickly, then her siblings were going to take the stuff because they're like, oh, I guess you're not going to eat that. Well, I'm going to eat it now. So she was like, no, I had to eat fast. Otherwise, I wasn't going to get to eat all the food that I wanted to eat. And I assume that the same was with my dad. And I think for my husband, because he grew up with siblings as well, I think it was a similar, like, no, you eat or your siblings are going to take stuff off your plate. I didn't ever have that in my life. So I had the privilege of just being able to eat how my body felt like eating. And I also had, a mom who was very supportive of, like, okay, yeah, you take the time you need to eat. Who's telling you to rush? So I think that may have been a little bit of like, I got that encouragement to just listen to my body from a young age. But yeah, that's, I wonder if they were to pool a bunch of people, if people with siblings tend to eat faster versus only children.
We see a clinical study on, yeah, exactly. That would be interesting to see. And I think it's important to pull back the science of, like, I'm sure there's a variety of different reasons of why eating slow is beneficial. I mean, I think it takes like 20 minutes for your body to determine if you're full or not. And so if you eat really fast, you can tend to eat a lot of food, but also the fact that when you chew, and I think they say chew your food. Do you know how many bites you're supposed to chew?
I've heard a few different things. I think I had one of my mentors who would just say, like, do 100 bites, which felt like a lot. And I'm like, that feels like a whole lot. But she would also purposefully say, she's like, I tell people 100 bites because if you get even half that much, that's great. Like,
oh my goodness. That seems, I'm very far from that. So, and that's a great goal to have. But one of the reasons I think having a variety of bites is what is happening on a scientific level. Maybe you can add to the story too, is that we're increasing the surface area. So the more you break something down, you're increasing the surface area, and we have these enzymes in our mouth that starts our digestive process. And I'm pretty sure it's amylase, it's going to break down the carbohydrates in our mouth. And so the more we break down this food, we're increasing the surface area for those digestive enzymes to start breaking down. So if you're only having, this much and you break it up once, you only have a certain amount of surface area. The enzymes, and we want to create that saliva. The saliva is what has the amylase that breaks down those carbohydrates. So the more you chew, the increased surface area, the more enzymes you have. Is there anything I'm missing in regards to that?
No, you're spot on with that. And the other thing I would just add to it is, I think that also goes under the bigger umbrella of digestion starts even before we put food in our mouth. I think a lot of people think that digestion starts when the food hits our stomach, but we start salivating hopefully when we're smelling something that smells appetizing. So we're getting those enzymes ready. And then yes, part of the digestion, the mechanical part of it, starts with chewing, starts in our mouth. Our stomach can't really handle breaking down. Like, you don't want to give it so much work to do. You want to do a good amount of that work before it hits your stomach. So now it can really work on breaking down the little bits so that we can get the most the nutrients from the foods that we're eating. And so I've found so I'll give an example of myself here, where in med school, especially my last year of med school, which was just incredibly stressful, getting ready for boards and everything, I developed horrible acid reflux. Like, I have a whole new empathy for people who struggle with acid reflux, because this is the worst feeling. It is so miserable, and it made me quite scared to eat a lot of foods for a while. And I had the enzymes, I had the supplements, and don't get me wrong, I love supplements. I use plenty of them still. And it was helping to a degree, but it still was there I was still getting a fair amount of reflux. And it wasn't until I was out of med school and I was really able to tend to my nervous system a bit better. And I was really able to chew my food better, because even being a slow eater, I was probably not chewing my food very well, which was then putting more stress on my stomach to have to break things down. And then I just wasn't digesting things well, and it was coming right back up on me. But in making that shift of being much more mindful while I ate and chewing my food and, taking those few breaths before I eat, sitting in a relaxed environment, that was the thing that really helped my reflux more than anything. Like, I didn't need the enzymes anymore. I didn't need the DGL and all the other stuff. That was such a firsthand moment for me, this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, it really is this foundational stuff that is like the most important thing. And it highlighted just that part of digestion that I think we don't really respect as much as I think we should.
Yeah, I was curious what word you were going to use, because I was like, I don't think it's no, because I think we ultimately know. We're just not prioritizing it or respecting it. I'm glad that you use that, because most of us are very aware and conscious of what we need to do, but we're not applying it, and we're wondering why we're having all these issues. And you talk about the mechanical. I forgot. Yeah, if there's two major points of digestion, is the mechanical and the chemical. So the mechanical is the chewing. The chemical is that amylase action going to work and other enzymes approaching from there. So beyond taking a few deep breaths, slowing things down, what other sort of applications would you recommend, whether these are foundational, simplified ways to support our gut health, kind of coming back to the basics? What else comes up for you, or things that you've provided for your clients that have worked really well?
Yeah. So coming back to the basics again there, I like to emphasize the importance of making sure that people are getting some fiber, protein, and some fat. I'm like, with anything that you eat, if it's your meal, if it's your snack, just take a quick look and make sure that you've got a source of protein, a source of fiber, and a source of healthy fats. And I usually give patients an example of all these, because even with, again, I have very, very educated patients, but sometimes going back to it, they're like, can you just remind me of some good sources of fiber and some good because I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. And totally fine. I would prefer that. But yeah, I'm like, so your veggies, your fruits, those are going to be great sources of fiber. There are these, the animal-based proteins, plant-based proteins that are going to be good sources here. You're going to get some fat. So I'll give people an example. Like, if you're going to have, like an apple with some nut butter, there you go. You covered it all. Or someone, it's like, I really like to have chips sometimes. And I'm not a big fan of demonizing foods or telling people, oh, well, cut out a bunch of things. Of course, there's a time and a place to cut out certain foods. And when appropriate, I will recommend it. But a lot of times I like to say, well, how can we just enhance what you're doing? So if you really love chips, how about we get some like guacamole in there with a bunch of like nice onions and, tomatoes. So now you've got your fiber, you've got a little protein, you got a little fat in there. Like, let's just enhance what you're doing. And they're really grateful for that. And now they become much more aware. And then as we get further on it, I tell people, well, if you can even up that more, like, our fiber goals are a lot higher than I think what we're getting. And maybe
let's pull that out.
Realize. Yeah.
A lot of us don't know how much fiber we should be consuming and what that actually looks like on a plate. And I think it's different for men and women. What is that optimal? I don't even want to use optimal now, but now I'm overthinking it. What is that goal that we should be shooting for fiber on a daily basis?
So it's about 25 grams of fiber for adult women, and then between like 35 to 38 grams of fiber for men.
Have you found why there's a difference? I mean, I know that there's so many biological differences between men and women, but why specifically more fiber for men?
That's a really good question. I don't know the exact answer. If I had to guess, I would guess that and I could be totally wrong about this, if I had to guess, it would be around what some of the more common health concerns tend to be for men versus women. And so when I think of fiber, like fiber is really protective for cardiovascular health. Fiber is really protective for our colon health, for so many things. And I wonder if, based on the demographics, although all that being said, we don't do nearly enough research looking at women, so all that could be wrong too.
No, I'm interested in kind of pulling that apart too. But that you made a good point there. So 25 to roughly 40 grams.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that look like on a plate? Are we even getting anywhere close to that? Luckily, there's a lot of plant gut health information that we're being saturated with, which I think is fantastic. A lot of conversations on fiber nowadays. So hopefully people are including that more. And is there a difference between natural food sources of fiber from fruits and vegetables and, you get a protein bar that has supplemental fiber in there? What does that look like? What's the difference between those?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always like to encourage whole foods because oftentimes you'll get that blend of like the soluble versus the insoluble fiber. You're also going to get a lot more minerals and other nutrients if you're getting it from the foods. But I'm not against other fiber supplements. I'm sometimes with the protein bars, they're not always my favorite because they just tend to be much more processed with a lot of other things that at least for my patient demographic, usually aggravates their gut symptoms. But for some of my patients, like, acacia fiber can be really nice, or psyllium can be really nice. And just a really good addition to bulk up their fiber. But the other reason why I like to focus on food first is because when we do add fiber in a supplement, whether it's coming from a bar, whether it's coming from a powder, usually you have to really up your water intake a lot, because what can happen is you can get super constipated if you don't. Whereas with food, I don't really see that happen. If someone's like, oh, I ate a whole bunch of strawberries and berries and nuts, and I hear the opposite happen, where they're like, I had really good healthy bowel movements for the first time in my life. So it's just, you get such a better balance of everything in terms of you're getting some hydration, you're getting the minerals, you're getting the fiber. But then, the other fiber options can be just on top of that if you need that extra push.
Couldn't agree more. And I've personally experienced that kind of you up in the supplemental fiber, especially. I don't know. I've always just been a sucker for protein bars. I don't know why, because I don't know. I just have, but I think it's built up this issue. Like even if you were dedicating your day to drinking water, sometimes the amount of supplemental fiber you're taking in is not going to make up for the amount of water that you're consuming, to your point of just focusing on real foods. But they're surprising. It's not just eating a bunch of broccoli and kale. There's a lot of foods out there that are rich in fiber that you can implement. I mean, I think, what is it? Half an avocado or a whole avocado? Like, avocado is very high in fiber. I think 10 grams. Gosh, I can't remember if that's for a half or a whole. That should be something I should know. But chia seeds,
pistachios are an awesome source of fiber. Those are one of my easy, because I love like snacking on nuts and stuff. It's just an easy, quick thing. And pistachios are super rich in fiber, which was really fun.
I'm curious I kind of want to pull up a list of like high fiber foods, because it's not always, these, avocados, 9 grams of fiber. Nice. I'm guessing that's for a full avocado. Raspberries, lentils, broccoli, oats, beans, almonds, chia seeds, pears. I mean, you make a breakfast of maybe some yogurt, chia seed, pear, and sprinkle it with some almonds. You just got a solid boost of fiber in your diet. So there are ways to increase our fiber intake. Obviously making sure you're increasing your water intake. So beyond kind of pulling back and setting aside time to slow down, to take some breaths before eating, to increase our fiber, any other kind of foundational tools to kind of wrap this up of coming back to basics, some of the simplified things we can do to improve our gut health?
Yeah. So another one that I've found to be also really helpful is is like making sure, like, the squatty potty type thing, like making sure that when you're going to the bathroom that you're actually in a good position to be able to go. And so it's one of those things that can be a good sort of starting place for some people. Cause I sometimes will get, again, that sort of type A person who's like, I'm not ready to make changes to my diet. I'm not ready to, sit down and be mindful before eating. That's just not where I'm at right now. Like, okay, can you get a little stool right in front of your toilet and just, can you at least be in a better position when you go to the bathroom? And that could be a really good place to get started.
I love that you mentioned that. And again, I think you're doing a phenomenal job of meeting your clients where they're at, of this is what I'm ready for. This is not what I'm ready for. And the thing is one, you don't have to, Squatty Potty is fantastic. And I've had a handful of them in my life. But even if you don't want a stool, like let's say, you have one restroom in your house and guests come in and you just don't want this present. Honestly, or if you're out in public, take a trash can and move the trash can. Whatever, TMI. I do that very often if I'm in certain areas and I don't have access. Not everybody has a squatty potty or even a stool in their bathroom. Take a pretty sturdy trash can, put that underneath. And what's actually happening scientifically of why this is improving our digestion is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that our internal organs are aligned, and I think it's like it's one of the sphincters. Is it like the descending colon? And there's all these terms, duodenum and all these different terminology. But when we're sitting kind of, in a 90-degree angle, there's this pressure that's kind of squeezing and not allowing a smooth evacuation. I don't have the organs and everything correct. But when you have your knees up a little bit higher and you're in more of this squatting position, it actually releases this pressure. And so now you have a much smoother evacuation. And so I think there was research done of these third world countries where they provided regular toilets that United States that we have here. And they actually went back to the squatting in a hole because they noticed it was so much easier, much smoother of an evacuation. So whether you want to throw a stool underneath or you take your trash can and even leaning forward a little bit, having your knees higher up, leaning forward, you might notice a tremendous improvement in your evacuation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that about the third world countries. So my family's from India, and I'll never forget, because I've been to India several times in my life now. I remember, especially as a kid, going for the first time. And, my family there, they all had toilets, but when we would go out to certain places, they would have the hole. And that was the first time I'd ever seen something like that. And as a kid, I was like, this is great. Like, I'm a short human being already. And so as a kid, I was, of course, even shorter than I am now. And I'm like, this is so much easier for me. And I remember just feeling like why doesn't everybody do this? This is just so like, I don't even remember specifically commenting on like going to the bathroom, that I was anything like that. I just remember it was a more pleasant experience, like all around. It was easy. I felt good doing it. And as a kid, for whatever reason, I thought it was just very fun. And I will always remember that. And when I go to India now, if I see one, it's certainly maybe not as fun as when I was a kid, but I do appreciate that still exists in certain places because I do kind of notice a difference.
I didn't even think about height wise, that if you're taller versus shorter, because if you're shorter, you're not in an optimal position. And if you're pretty tall, you're probably naturally, your knees are probably higher. Yeah. So you might I didn't even think about that. So for those of you listening who might be on the shorter side, this is another reason to even boost your feet up a little bit. I was looking up, the squatting position allows the thighs to support the colon and aids in creating intra-abdominal pressure. I was trying to figure out what was like the squeezing on. Yeah, I can't remember what it is. But either way, the science of the body It's a much easier evacuation when you can pull the knees up, and there's ways we can do it. I mean, if you're out in public, and actually, that's another conversation for another day, but a lot of people will hold in their stool if they're out in public. Like that can start building up and leading to other issues too. And so creating a consistent routine where you're maybe sitting down every single morning and you're building this into your practice is going to be something helpful. So I don't know. I think that might have pulled away. We were talking about poop for quite some time, but it is a very important conversation.
Very.
I appreciate this conversation so much. And I think I love the pivot, and I appreciate your ability to we were going to be here and talk about SIBO and the importance of that. And there is absolutely a place for that. But I think a lot of us, we just need to come back to the basics. We need to slow down. We need to take a deep breath. Most of us all have the time, the opportunity to do it. We're just not prioritizing it. I know we don't want to hear that. And no matter how busy we are, if you're a CEO, if you have 10 kids, we all have the time and the opportunity to slow down just a bit. And how can we integrate that a little bit more into our lives, into our days? And maybe that is 3 times a week, having a meal off the side of the road. How can we find a place for that in our lives? Is there any lasting pieces you'd like to leave with our listeners in the conversation of gut health, back to basics, or anything that you kind of want to provide or some insights?
Well, I would really, mostly just sort of reiterating again, I think my husband and I like to have this reminder for each other where, we're both very hardworking individuals, and we grew up with this sort of no, you work really hard. This is what you need to do. And it's great. It's a really good thing to have. But we have to remind ourselves, what are we working so hard for? We're working so hard so that we can live a life that we enjoy and feel proud of, and what are our values, and how is our life working towards fulfilling those values? And I think that also comes back to a very foundational piece, because when I am sometimes working very, very long hours for a very long day, I have to remind myself, okay, so you're doing this right now because you're trying to build and get to a place where you are not doing this so much, right? Right? Because if not, then you need to start to come back to the basics of why are you working so hard, and not just working hard because you're in the hamster wheel of working hard and that's all you kind of feel conditioned to do. Because I at least can fall into that pattern where I just get used to working and working and working and working and working. For me, at least, what ends up happening is eventually I get sick. And then I'm out for a few weeks and my body's like, well, now you have to rest. Now you can't do anything else. And so I have to remember what's my goal here. And it goes back to that. If I am trying to be more efficient, that doesn't mean that I get to add more things to my plate that I've just opened up now. I became more efficient so that I could have more room in my plate to live this kind of life and appreciate these moments that are so meaningful to me. So I like to remind people of that, of go back to why you're doing this. What are your values? And maybe you aren't able to take those moments so much today, but are you at least working towards a place where you can get there? Because that's going to be really life-changing.
I love that reminder so much, and just creating that check-in of why are we ultimately doing this, and coming back to your piece of finding that accountability partner, because it's hard to do this alone. And I don't think we can do this alone. So whether that is a spouse or a friend or a colleague, can we build in these check-ins, whatever you're working on? And maybe that is, our why. Are we doing this for the reasons that we started with, and deep down that we want to do this with? So I absolutely love that reminder. Something that I think I need to do and integrate into my day as well. Dr. Anjali, where can listeners find more information about you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, so Dr. Anjali ND, and I'm on TikTok as well, or on my website, dranjalind.com, so people can find out more about me there if they want to work with me one-on-one. I have my office here in Burbank. I also see patients and clients virtually, and I'm in the process of I'm creating a course around holistic anxiety support. So it's called "What You Wish Your Doctor Told You About Healing Anxiety."
Cool. I
And
love that.
yeah, so that's going to be out and ready to go within the next few months. So more people have access to this information and ways to really advocate for themselves in this system.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to leave all your show note or all the information in the show notes below. And maybe when this program does come out, we'll update the show notes to include kind of the resources on how they can find this program. But thank you so much for chatting today and exploring this conversation and pivoting. And I think it brought up some really great reminders that I can integrate into my life. And I hope our listeners pulled away some insights that they can utilize in their days as well.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon, and thank you again.
Yeah.